Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 had just taken off from Portland, Oregon, when a section of its cabin ripped off.
A shocking sight in the night sky over Florida.
Oh my God, it's on fire.
The Lion Air pilots may not have understood why their new 737 MAX was suddenly in a nosedive or how to get out of it.
There was a time when Boeing was unanimously considered one of the greatest aerospace companies in the world. It was the mark of the utmost excellence. Its name was spoken of with reverence. But as The Godfather says,
all good things must come to an end.
Fast forward to the 21st century, and the company remains a shell of its once great past. Its legacy, in tatters. Its crashes hog headlines for days. No, not just the stock market ones. October 2018, Lion Air Flight 610, a domestic Indonesian flight, takes off from Soekarno-Hatta International Airport in Jakarta for Depati Amir Airport, Pangkal Pinang. Tragically, air traffic controllers lose contact with the plane 13 minutes after it takes off, crashing into the Java Sea. It was the first crash involving the corporation's newly minted 737 MAX jets, but alas, it wasn't the last. March 2019, Ethiopian Airlines. Flight 302 takes off from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, for Nairobi, Kenya. It fails to reach its destination yet again. Within 6 months, this second 737 MAX flew a mere 6 minutes before crashing near the town of Bishoftu in central Ethiopia. This catastrophic event marked a decisive turning point, sealing the fate of the Boeing brand and irrevocably altering the lives of those who had entrusted their safety to it. The Chinese civil aviation authorities were quick to ground the airliner, and others followed suit. 2 crashes were too many. Boeing was once again in the crosshairs, but the US Federal Aviation Authority seemed rather unfazed by the issue, reaffirming the continued airworthiness of the planes. Strange, huh? But why would the FAA endanger the lives of US citizens? Yeah, you're probably right. They have no incentive at all. After all, they did ground the 737 MAX 8 and 9, only they did it much later than countries like India, China, and Brazil. You might be asking, how did Boeing respond to all of this?
These tragedies continue to weigh heavily on our hearts and minds. We feel terrible about these accidents, and we apologize for what happened. We are sorry for the loss of lives in both accidents. I'd like to speak directly to the families of the victims who are here with us. On behalf of myself and the Boeing Company, we are sorry, deeply and truly sorry.
They blamed the software, particularly the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, or MCAS, and promised to roll out an update within weeks. But if Boeing engineers knew the risks, why was it there in the first place? What if there is evidence going back decades of safety issues at Boeing? Now, every corporation has a few skeletons in its closet. It's just, there are an entire army of skeletons here. With 2 crashes in the span of 6 months as a direct result of Boeing's actions, the company had to answer. But did it really? Like other major corporations in the country, they were confident about the outcome. If any company could handle a storm like this, it would be this one, the 3rd largest defense contractor in the world. Ask yourself, how much power does a multi-billion-dollar corporation hold? Its reach extends like an octopus, its tentacles finding home in the pockets of Washington cronies and regulators. Ironically, the same people who are supposed to keep us safe. But what incentives could possibly make a company so obsessed with squeezing every cent out of their aircraft? Where did this money-hungry, too-big-to-fail corporate beast come from? And why is its current behavior inevitable? It all started with this man. William E. Boeing was a young lumber baron who had stakes in various lumber companies in the Pacific Northwest. He had experimented with boats in the past and was now looking to dip his toes into something fresh and exciting. He found the object of his desire on one fateful day in 1909 when he stepped into the Alaska Yukon Pacific Exposition, taking place in Seattle. It was a manned flying machine. He became obsessed with the concept, and by 1915 he was taking flying lessons in Los Angeles. He brought a pilot to Seattle to assemble a plane for him, but the machine was damaged in a crash. So, Mr. Boeing gave in.
Fine, I will do it myself.
And formed the Aero Products Company in 1916. A year later, he would rename it Boeing Airplane Company. The company was doing good business. Its seaplanes and land planes were the talk of the town. The US Navy bought 51 Model C two-place training seaplanes in 1916, and the US Army bought 2 land plane versions. World War I contracts had built Boeing's rapport with the government, so they decided to build on the relationship by entering the developing airmail market. After being awarded a government contract, Boeing delivered the first international airmail in North America in 1919. In the early and mid-20s, the private enterprise quickly earned a reputation for its reliability and innovation. It was a source of national pride, a testament to the country's pioneering spirit. In the late 20s and early 30s, Boeing acquired several aircraft manufacturers: Avian, Chance Vought, Sikorsky Aviation, Stearman Aircraft, and Hamilton Metal Plane, and teamed up with Pratt & Whitney to merge into a single firm, United Aircraft and Transport. In 1934, the Airmail Act forced airlines and manufacturers to operate separately, so the company dissolved into 3 groups, one of them being Boeing Airplane Company. With the dissolution of United Aircraft, William Boeing sold his shares and left the company. But the Boeing name was still the epitome of aviation excellence. The envy of every aerospace company on the planet, its name was taken with reverence and pride as competitors tried to emulate its success. The company's B-17 bombers were iconic symbols during the Second World War.
Say hello to my little friend!
In the early years of the Cold War, Boeing worked on missile technology and developed military jet fighters with higher speed and more range, effectively giving birth to the jet age. Fighter jets made major differences in conflicts around the world, including the Korean War. In 1958, the company made its return to the commercial aircraft market with a bang. The first US commercial jet airliner, the Boeing 707. As propeller-driven aircraft fell out of favor and the jet age commenced, the company's innovation in the public space turned it into a household name. The 707 quickly went into service for Pan American Airlines and revolutionized global travel. Boeing used this positive momentum to acquire Piasecki Helicopter Corporation and turn it into a division called Vertol. To better reflect its versatile defense, space, and communications manufacturing capabilities, Boeing Airplane Company was renamed Boeing Company only 4 years after opening the doors of the 707 airliner to the public. The company made the pivotal decision to open its own doors to public investors as well. Boeing went public through an IPO on January 2, 1962. 2 years pass, and NASA makes contact. The space race was on, and they needed 5 lunar orbiters, the machine used in the historic Apollo 11 mission. Boeing collaborated on this project with North American Rockwell, who were producing Apollo Command and Service modules. But the 2 aerospace contractors were in competition for other NASA contracts and projects. Competition is healthy. As we will discuss shortly, so Boeing introduced the twin-engine 737, the second best-selling commercial jet aircraft in aviation history. A couple of years later, the jumbo jet 747 also took its first commercial flight. The 70s spelled trouble for the aviation monolith as Vietnam War spending decreased and the Apollo program neared its conclusion. To add salt to the wounds, a lone hijacker boarded a Boeing 727 and demanded $200,000 in ransom and 4 parachutes. After receiving said amount, the man falsely known as D.B. Cooper parachuted out of the plane. never to be seen again. Subsequent investigations failed to identify the man or find the money. Most experts think that the man did not survive the dive. But there is the odd chance that he might have survived, raking in a plane load of bucks, very much like the Boeing executives of today. Boeing was introducing new commercial planes like the 757 and 767, but competition had increased in the US with the rise of McDonnell Douglas, as well as abroad, in the form of Airbus, a European commercial airliner manufacturer. So, they started taking on more military projects, but Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman were sucking up all the oxygen in that space. So, in 1997, Boeing decided to reduce the competition by buying its rival, McDonnell Douglas. After the 737 MAX crashes, people were quick to call out this merger as the root cause. The merger was dubbed a reverse takeover, as McDonnell Douglas's Harry Stonecipher became the CEO, and his business philosophy took the front seat. Their commercial ventures, like DC-10 and MD-11, were struggling, and they had failed to innovate over the past few years. Their passion for affordability meant that they were focusing on cost reduction and shareholder value, not engineering excellence or product reliability. The new McDonnell Douglas execs were busy tracking financial metrics, and Boeing's lauded engineering-centric approach fell by the wayside. Like a wolf in sheep's clothing, this cultural shift ate the company from the inside out. The financially charged mentality of executives made them feel challenged by Airbus's A320neo, so they rushed the development and production of the 787 and 737 MAX, a choice whose devastating consequences are now there for the entire world to see. The gradual erosion of the engineering-driven culture at Boeing over the past 2 decades has been nothing short of a tragedy. Executives please shareholders with stock buybacks instead of spending that cash on, aircraft manufacturing. Moving the Boeing HQ from Seattle was the last straw. Stonecipher remarked that he wanted to free HQ decision-making from the day-to-day manufacturing operations. Too good to work in the factory? Anybody? No? Just me? But even that was not far enough. The company started outsourcing the production of their parts to companies like Spirit Aerosystems. Doing so allowed them to acquiesce some partners in crime. If something goes wrong, the liability is partially distributed.
He's got your back.
The 737 MAX crashes are a recent development, but the flawed safety culture that made them possible has been cultivating for years.
We have planes all over the world that have issues that nobody has found, because of the pressure Spirit has put on employees to get the job done so fast,
said Cornell Beard, president of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers chapter, representing workers at Spirit's Wichita factory. Take this lawsuit that claims that Spirit Aerosystems allowed widespread product defects. A manager even told an employee to change the criterion for defects to lower those numbers. But don't all these incidents hurt the executives too? Here's a secret. They don't. It's the insurers who end up paying the price. The 737 MAX incidents cost insurance underwriters more than $2 billion in losses. If Wall Street folk know which stocks to buy and sell, they must know how to run a company too, right? Since Boeing is now a publicly traded company, the shareholders elect board members, and you know that they only want to turn that stock graph green for quick gains. This is very different from private companies, where concentrated ownership can keep everyone grounded in long-term goals. As it stands, Boeing, an engineering-based company, has a leadership of accountants, lawyers, and finance guys. They hire engineers without having personal knowledge of what it takes to build an aircraft. Compare this with the old Boeing, in which engineers in leadership roles ran the company and hired finance guys to help them achieve their goals. Now, let's take the recent crashes. Boeing can't cover up this mess on their own. So, good thing they have their hands in the cookie jar then, eh? The government repeatedly bails out the business because for the past 2 decades, aviation was the US's biggest manufacturing export. Its reputation has fallen in recent years, but with Boeing as the sole jetliner manufacturer in the United States, the government cannot afford to lose it. And that's why monopolies leave such a sour taste in our mouths. Boeing has plenty of friends in high places to make sure that their business runs smoothly despite its leadership's disheveled and corrupt state. The company has contracts that employ the constituents of many states, making it far too big to fail. Nobody trusts politicians to be good with money, unless it's their own.
We have a responsibility to report in the stock, on the stock, but I'm not familiar with that 5-month review, but if people aren't reporting, they should be.
If anything, the 2020 Congressional Insider Trading scandal not only implies their involvement in the scheme, but it also explicitly demonstrates their direct participation. Republican Mike Garcia sold $50,000 of Boeing shares before a congressional investigation published a damning report on the debacles of the 737 MAX. And wouldn't you know it? He's not the only congressperson who's got a stake in Boeing. Plenty of representatives buy defense stocks, and the not-so-secret military-industrial complex rears its ugly head here as well. Around 51 members of Congress and their spouses own between 2.3 to 5.8 million worth of stock in Boeing and other defense contractors like Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, and Raytheon. Not only that, these contractors further extend their reach by hiring former high-ranking DoD officials. Around a quarter of them work for the top 5 contractors. So, do these companies have no regulatory oversight? It seems that way, at least. Come to think of it, the Federal Aviation Authority must give them a hard time. Wrong. The FAA is their sweetheart. They've cozied up like Romeo and Juliet. After the Airbus A320neo took to the skies, Boeing was worried about its competition. So, they used their contacts in the under-resourced FAA to help move along the regulatory process for the 737 MAX. In 2015, the FAA pushed its safety engineers to delegate crucial safety assessments to Boeing, and in September 2020, the US House of Representatives Transportation and Infrastructure Committee released a damning report on the 737 MAX crashes. A series of faulty technical assumptions by Boeing's engineers, a lack of transparency on the part of Boeing's management, and grossly insufficient oversight by the FAA. Who could have guessed? By November 2020, the regulators had cleared the 737 MAX for flight. By January 2021, the EU's aviation regulator had done the same. So, is everything sorted then? No. On January 5th, 2024, Alaska Airlines Flight 1282, flying from Portland, Oregon to Ontario, California, had a little issue. The passenger door of the Boeing 737 MAX 9 blew out 6 minutes after takeoff. The plane returned to Portland, and thankfully everybody on board survived the crisis. Gee. I hope they sort this mess out now. But once again, no. Instead of fixing a critical part of the plane, Boeing has now asked the FAA for an exemption to safety standards for anti-icing systems on the 737 MAX. Amid the backlash, the company's top brass has maintained that they're developing a long-term solution that would face FAA review. We wholeheartedly believe them. For the executives, even the crashes haven't caused a ton of concern. They've been receiving executive payouts, bonuses, and private travel despite the crashes. CEO Dave Calhoun's 2021 take-home pay last year was $7.4 million, even as the business lost $4.2 billion due to the fallout of COVID and the 737 MAX disasters. And let's not forget that as they fired their previous CEO, Dennis Muilenburg, for his role in the crisis, they also gave him a pat on the back. He left with a $62.5 million golden parachute. Ask yourself how you would feel about those pesky safety details if, when worst comes to worst, you can walk away with a $62.5 million emergency escape plan. the new CEO threw his predecessor under the bus, claiming, "If anybody ran over the rainbow for the pot of gold on stock, it would have been him." But the real problem here is the lack of domestic competition. Boeing's monopoly in commercial aviation has made it too big to fail. So much so that even the federal government decides to play to its tunes. Will Boeing be able to prevail against greed to rebalance itself to its historical foundation of being engineer-driven and safety first? As things stand, it seems highly unlikely. Executive greed still greases the wheels and secures the wings we entrust our lives to. If there's any silver lining, it's that even with all of these issues, flying Boeing is still safer than driving a car. But do tell us, how would you feel about flying on a 737 MAX? Depending on how that question makes you feel, you might be interested in this kayak.com feature, which allows you to exclude certain aircraft models when searching for a flight. And if you are looking for the best prices, remember that airline fares aren't the same for all customers. You can often get a discount by changing your IP address to somewhere with a lower cost of living. NordVPN makes it especially quick to switch your IP address from region to region so that you can maximize your savings. Leave a comment to let us know your thoughts and what you want to see in the next video. And remember to subscribe for a new investigation in the coming week. Stay curious, my friends.